My guest today is Federico Rios Escobar, a renowned photojournalist originally from Colombia, who's covered many topics, including migration across Latin America for media outlets like the New York Times, for example. Federico, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sasha. It's an honor.
I'm also very happy to speak to you because you have a very unique perspective on the complex issue of migration, particularly in the Americas. When and why did you start covering migration?
The first time I photographed migrants was in 2015. I was following caravans of Venezuelan migrants traveling out from Venezuela by foot, walking into the Colombian mountains. They reach the border between Venezuela and Colombia and they start walking the mountains, trying to make it to Bogota, which is the capital city of Colombia. But that journey took them like maybe 2 or 3 weeks on foot on the side of the road. And also, they have to cross uh, mountains and valleys they were not prepared for. Um, there's a mountain called Berlin, and it's like 3,300 meters above sea level, and that means it's very cold. It's very um, it's very harsh. The weather is rainy. The altitude also is like you start losing the oxygen in your lungs. You can't breathe easily, and they were not prepared for that. From there, uh, I realized there were a smallest number of Venezuelans traveling south, not to Colombia but to Brazil, and I went to Brazil to photograph them. And I crossed the Great Savannah of Venezuela with them. Most of them were indigenous from the Warao ethnic group, going to Brazil because they didn't knew where to go, and they were like out of food and energy and schools and medical supplies and everything. So they were heading south to Brazil, and it was much more complex because in Brazil there's a different language. They speak Portuguese in Brazil. It's the only country in South America that speaks a different language than Spanish. So for the ones coming to Colombia, at least there was the same language. The one going to Brazil was a different language, a different uh, perspective of many other things. So it was much more complex.
Mhm. Migration can be a very polarizing issue. And in your photographs, you cover the human aspect of migration beyond the politics. What makes you highlight? Why do you think it's important to highlight the individual stories, the struggles, the dreams that migrants have?
I have focused on poor people migrating, not even in migration because it's a very wide word. It's a very wide concept. But the poor migrants are people who touch the bottom of life at a point where they lost their hope and they can't hold themselves or their families in the place where they are. So when somebody in those conditions decide to migrate, they decide to left everything behind. And the most important is that they are conscient of the idea of not coming back. That's a very compelling concept for me because this idea of not coming back is like it's so hard to understand. And basically for the people listening to us in this conversation, they can be migrants somehow, like those people migrating here and there, moving from one city to the other or moving from one country to the other country, even with families. And it's for that kind of middle class migrants, even for them, it's very complex because they miss their home, their food, the block where they grow, the friends, everything. It's like new country, new life, new everything, and it's so complex to go back, and people start missing some things. But poor migrants, it's much more complex for them, much more complex for them. So for me, it's very compelling, and it's very important to give some awareness, to put this on the table, so people can be able to speak about it, because otherwise, uh, most of us, most of the people who see these articles and these photographs, they can't understand the conditions these people are migrating in. Mm, the idea of not coming back is so hard. The idea of bringing your kids and risking their lives, that's that's huge. And some people have pointed their fingers on the people in my photograph, like how they dare to bring the kids and risk their lives. The kids can lose their lives, or the kids can be separated from the parents. The other option is leaving them behind and not seeing them anymore in life. So either of both is not an easy choice, or you risk your son's or your daughter's life, or you decide not to see them anymore. Uh, in the case of the Venezuelan migrants, they decide to go to the United States and work really hard and try to send some money back so their kids can have like some basic needs covered and better conditions for the livelihood than what the grown ones had when they were young. But at the same time, it's like depriving a kid to grow without her father and her mother is something I can't just imagine.
Hmm.
So for me, it's important to highlight how these people is migrating desperately because they have no basic needs covered. Uh, it's
Where
a
they come from.
and it's not only an economic situation. It's much more than that. It's greater than that. Is the economy, is the education, is the access, is the possibility to travel, is the possibility to see the world. Um, if if you go to the north, and I mean the global north, if you come to Europe, if you go to the United States, you can easily find uh, public spaces with wider audience. If you walk by a park, if you walk by a lake, you can find like a street concert or street performance, things like that. You don't find them that often in the south, in the global south. I mean, it's like I think like I have been photographing migration through the Darien Gap, migration from Venezuela mostly, and many other countries crossing the Darien Gap trying to reach the States. But when I go to the concept, migration is happening from the global south to the global north because of the same reasons. So Africa, Europe is basically the same. It's like you don't find parks, you don't find public scenarios, you don't find arts and culture. You don't have that kind of opportunities. You know, it's not just about money. It's about the livelihood. It's about the condition you live and the condition you can share with your family to grow your kids.
Your work has been featured in publications like the New York Times, National Geographic. How do you choose which stories you will tell through your photographs?
Well, I have to give a lot of credit to my photo editors working with me, and I have to give a lot of credit also to the journalists working with me. For National Geographic, I work with Paula Ramon. She's a freelance writer from Brazil. For New York Times, I work mostly with Julie Turkowitz in the Darien Gap, but I have worked also with Ken Bensinger in the Darien Gap for the New York Times, and I work with Nick Casey when I start covering migration from Venezuela to Colombia. I work with Sofia Villamil. I have worked with many good and talented writers, but also it's dialogue with my photo editors because when you're there, you're so involved that sometimes you lose the scope. So I work really hard trying to choose who to photograph and what to show. But honestly, the filter needs more people also, and my editors and my colleagues helps me a lot.
Do migrants want to be photographed and interviewed?
I never photograph somebody who don't want to be photographed. And if by accident, because it had happened, if by accident I photograph somebody who doesn't want to be in the picture, I just delete the picture. It's like, I don't care. I just don't care. I was in the middle of Darien Gap walking by myself. Like Julie Turkowitz, my colleague, was back in the base, like 2 days walking back from what I was. She was riding a lot. And I was climbing a hill, a very muddy hill, and I saw this old woman, maybe 80 years old, walking the hill. She was not walking by herself. Like there was a group of people helping her and holding her arms, like yeah, like basically carrying her. Like as she was like trying to walk in the mud. Her dress was all covered in mud, and her face was all sweaty. And you could see a very old woman walking. And I start photographing, and I start photographing and photographing. When I'm photographing, I try to be very aware of the people in front of my camera and the people in the surroundings also. And the people around that old woman, they seem to be okay with my pictures. Not the old woman, because she was like extremely exhausted, like looking down. She was not even looking at me. And I was thinking these are very powerful and compelling images to tell how even an 80 years old woman is walking the Darien Gap, trying to make it to the States. So if you lost hope at that point that you're risking your life when you're 80 or maybe more, so I think this is the telling image. The woman reached the top of the mountain where I was, and the people around were looking for a place for a fallen trunk to seat that woman so she can catch her breath. They set her, and I took a couple of more pictures, and I just moved back so can have like some space and some air. And I moved back, and I was like just holding my camera on my chest, looking at the woman, but from a distant, you know. And I was standing there, and somebody approached me, and in a very bad English, there was this young guy telling me the woman was her grandmother, and asking me to delete those photographs because he told me, this is my grandmother. We come from Afghanistan, and she didn't have her face and her head covered. If my family or any relative see this picture, she will be disgraced. This is going to be a dishonor for her to be in a photo without covering her head or her face. And I didn't have a problem. Like I just got my camera in front of the guy, just delete the pictures. Even when I knew those were going to be like powerful and telling images. But I think nobody, it doesn't matter how big it is, the media or the publication or the audience the photo is going to have, nobody should be photographed and published without their permission. So one of the things that makes me proud as a photographer is that most of the people I photograph, all the people I photograph allow me to photograph them. I have, like, I would say 95% of the names of the people. Most of the people I photograph, I stay in touch with them. It's very tricky in the jungle because you can't ask them for the WhatsApp because there's no reception in the jungle, and most of them lost their phones on the journey. So I asked them for WhatsApp, email, and Facebook. Facebook still being very popular in Latin America, and I still using Facebook even when most of my friends are not there because that's my point of contact with most of the migrants. And also I try to photograph the people with respect and with a conversation. So when I was preparing this exhibition with IFRC, the communications team used one of the photographs to design a piece to promote the exhibition. When they send me the piece, the first thing I do is sharing the piece with Maria Alejandra, which is the woman in the center of the piece, with her family. And she was so happy that yesterday I posted a piece on my social media, and immediately Alejandra shares that on her social media. I'm really proud that Maria Alejandra saw the picture after they exited the jungle. I showed them the picture. That was more than a year ago. And yesterday, when I shared the piece on my social media, and Maria Alejandra reposted on her social media, that makes me feel proud. That means she doesn't feel objectified, and she doesn't feel betrayed or mistreated with my picture, but proud of what she had made. And like, this is what she does. And also, like, she understands what I do as a journalist. She understands that I photograph her with respect, enough respect to be able to show her circle of friends and family how I photograph her and how I'm having an exhibition here with her pictures, and she feels represented by my pictures. That's the tool on my mental health, to go to sleep every night. That I feel that I'm not betraying people in front of my camera, of my camera, but treating them with full respect and creating a connection. I use very small and short distance lenses, so I don't shot people from long distance. I need to be like 2 or 3 meters from people to photograph them. And in the jungle, it's like once I lift my camera in a road, in the jungle, in a dirty path, in a muddy path, or under the rain or under the sun, like there's no way to photograph these people without them knowing you're photographing them. And you're not going to find pictures taken by me of people covering their faces, or like
Mhm.
trying to put their hand between them and my camera. So that makes me proud, and that kind of that's my tool to reconcile myself with my pictures and go to sleep every night.
That's really wonderful to hear that preserving the dignity of the migrants that you photograph is really an important part of your work. So thank you for that. One of the misconceptions about migration through the Darien jungle is that most people are coming from South and Central America, but that's not accurate. The migrants that cross there come from all over the world.
Yes,
Can you talk about who you've encountered? Where have people come from
there
besides
is.
Afghanistan?
Yes, there's 195 countries in the world. About 195. That's basically the count. Um, and there is 100 nationalities crossing the Darien Gap. That's more than half of the countries in the world. I have seen people from Bangladesh, Mali, Somalia, China, Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan. Like, when you think that more than 100 nationalities are crossing the Darien Gap, that helps you understand the size of the situation. When you think people from half of the countries in the world are traveling South America, risking their lives in huge economic debts to try to make it to the States, looking for a better future, risking everything they have and looking to not go back. That helps you understand the size of the situation and the size of the problem, because this is a global problem. Um, Collapsing economies, countries without education, uh, healthcare, opportunities, like basic access to food, things like that. Mm,
Conflict, right?
of course,
Yeah.
conflicts
Mhm.
are one of the main reasons. Uh, but somehow it's like you would expect people from a country in conflict trying to flee the country. What you wouldn't be expecting is people from a peaceful country fleeing the country because even in peaceful times, they can't find enough opportunities for them. One of the things that I have found in Darien Gap is Venezuelans that are not coming from Venezuela but from other parts of the countries. Venezuelans who fled Venezuela many years before and tried to settle life in Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil. And after years of work, they were not able to afford anything, like anything basic. Again, I'm not looking for a like a I don't know an airplane. No, 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 no. Basic stuff, very basic stuff. So I have this photo of Luis Miguel and her daughter. Luis Miguel was 27 years old. He came from Venezuela. He was a mechanic himself. He came with his wife, or Luis Brainer, his son, was 7, and Melissa, his daughter, was 4 years old. His mother-in-law and a brother of her wife. There was 6 of them. They set up in a small city in Colombia, and the only work he found was like doing moto taxi, which is like a cab but in a motorcycle, paying like 50 cents a ride. He was not able to put enough food on his table. He was not able to pay for the school of her sons. Um, he was not able to pay for anything. There were the 6 of them living in one room. So it's like that's not the basic. And I think for many people going against migration, that's what's hard to understand. Because they think these migrants have a decent life in the places where they come from, and they don't. And they had decent lives, and they decide to migrate because they are dreaming about a private plane. But no, that's a common mistake. So Luis Miguel risked his life. He traveled the jungle with his family. On the second day of his journey, he was so exhausted, so exhausted. He had to sit down. He was not able to speak. He continued his journey. He crossed the jungle. He exited the jungle. They were living in a church in Guatemala, collecting coins and selling candies on the red lights. After months of traveling the jungle, he made it to the States. He works 2 shifts. His wife also has 2 shifts of work. The kids attend school. Melissa graduated from kinder school. Luis Brainer is attending also school, and he's going to baseball classes, public free lessons of baseball, and Melissa is attending dances. They had an old used car, but it's the first car of their life. It's very particular because in Europe, most of people don't own a car, but because they don't want to and because they don't need to, they can like just use a bicycle or walk or use public transportation. In the States, having a car is like a basic need because things are much more forward. And Luis Miguel sent me this video of his kids when he bring the car to his house, and it was just like if I can't describe the happiness of these kids because this was something way beyond their dreams. They never dream about having a car. And this is not even a new one. This is a used old car. But these kids were like mind blown. It's like I don't know if someone comes to me and tell me, okay, pack your stuff. We're going to Mars. Something like that. It's like so big that it's not even on their dreams. And I saw that video, of course, with tears in my eyes. And I was like, this is middle class basic stuff. This is not winning the lottery. This is not something like that.
Mm-hmm. You spoke about the challenges or the danger of the Darien jungle, how difficult this route actually is, how impossible it is. I understand there's sort of official and unofficial routes across the jungle, and you've been on both. Can you share some of your personal experiences?
So basically, there's a part of the journey where migrants pay to groups that control the area, and that makes that part of the journey safer for them. And there are other parts of the journey where nobody's controlling the area, and the migrants are quite often victims of thefts and sexual assaults, because nobody controls the area, and then nobody is guaranteeing their security.
I can't possibly imagine having to do this. So it's not just the physical threat and challenges that people go through, it's also the psychological, right? The mental toll this must have on adults and especially children, which is what you talked about earlier. Is there anything that you think our listeners and viewers should know or be aware of in particular when it comes to understanding what these people are going through?
So the mental health toll on a migrant that crosses the Darien Gap has to be huge. That has to create a deep impact. That maybe I'm not a mental health professional. Of course, I got attention on mental health because of my work, but I think that would be one of my top priorities to suggest in case somebody asks about what to do about migrants. It's like I think they need mental health because this is physically very challenging, of course. Mm. But I think it's way easier to recover from the wounds on the body than recover on the mental health situation. And this is affecting everybody, like uh, starting from the kids and, of course, the grown ones. But for a kid, it's like I can't imagine what happens to a kid mind walking next to a dead body on the route and asking their parents, "Mommy, Papa, what happened to this guy? Like he just died." And also the uncertainty of where are you going to sleep, what are you going to eat, when are you going to reach what you're looking for. mm. And I think that's a mental health wound that's going to last forever. That's very challenging also because what I have learned is that mental health care is not just like in one visit to a mental health professional, but a sustained treatment through the years. I learned that because I do that myself.
I was going to ask you, how do you take care of your mental health? Because I'm sure this must affect you, even as
Just like
as an
that.
observer.
Just like that. I can't. Like one thing I learned a few years ago is like if you have a broken bone, you don't go to your house and try to care to yourself. If you have a broken bone, you go to the doctor. The doctor takes an X-ray and decide if you need
A cast.
if you need a cast or if you need surgery. So the doctor is the one deciding, and you're not the one deciding what to do with your broken bone. If you have a mental health situation, it's the same. It's not you the one deciding to go to your house and trying and forcing yourself to smile. Like you go to a mental health professional and you give yourself up, and the mental health professional is the one telling you what's the professional procedure to do with you. Like you when I went to the psychiatrist for the first time, I entered her room and I told her, "I'm here because I think I need to be here, but I don't want medication." And she was the one explaining to me. She told me like, "I'm going to take care of this. I need to look at it, and then I'm going to ask it, and I'm going to tell you what you need. But this is not you telling me what you need. If you need medication, I'm going to tell you need medication. If you need treatment or conversation, that's what I'm going to give you. And if you need medication, I'm going to give you medication, and you better take it. And I was like, wow, yeah, you're right. And then I start taking like I start taking like a periodic treatment. I and I think it's very important. Like that would be like my number one advice for a journalist, for a photographer, um, and also for a humanitarian worker is you're gonna see something like this, go treat yourself before, not after, before, because it works like that. Like if you can be prepared to see what you're going to see, that's going to be better. It's not a muscle, but it works like a muscle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like you train, so when you're in the field, you can take it without pain, and then you exit, and then you go again because you need to digest all that you have seen in a different way. That said, I will have to insist on the mental health of the migrant population in a different level, because it would be very unfair and it would be nonsense to try to compare my mental health situation with a migrant mental health situation. Because even when I have a really hard time seeing what I have seen in the Darien Gap, there's a huge difference. I'm working there. I know I have my safe space. I know I have my work. I know I have my house and my bed far from there. And I can exit the jungle anytime, jump in a plane, and go back and stay in my safe space. They don't. They just don't. They are there risking everything with nothing back and nothing in front but hope, nothing else. They have no guarantees. They have no network of safety. They have nobody to call in an emergency. They have nothing. But also, they can't access mental health once they exit the jungle because they don't want to stay in Panama for 1 or 2 years just having mental health attention.
Mm-hmm.
They want to keep going. They want to move forward because they want to reach the United States and find a job, a house, food, a school for the kids, some basic stability, and maybe then they can have mental health access.
This actually brings me to mention that the IFRC network of national societies and their local staff and volunteers, of course, play an important role on this route through the Darien jungle to make sure that the migrants are really not alone on this journey. They're not there throughout, but they are there at certain points. We call them humanitarian service points. And this is where our teams provide not mental health, but psychosocial support services, as well as you mentioned earlier, phones. People lose their phones. If they have them, they can charge them here. If they don't, they can make a phone call using the phones there. They are provided with food, first aid, water, cash vouchers so they can buy some necessities. Have you seen firsthand some of the work of the Red Cross when you were there?
Yes, at the exit of the jungle, there's a migrant reception center in Panama. It's called Lajas Blancas. There are like governmental institutions there, and there's a big white container of the Red Cross. And most of migrants go straight there because that looks like a safe place for them, and they go there for wide variety of things. Sometimes they just want to talk to somebody, and I think that's like the first humanitarian act is just to listen. And I have seen many people with this, sometimes white, sometimes red vests, like just talking to people, talking to people that like that. That's kind of, for me, that was very interesting. Just people who want to be heard. So
Yeah.
they just walk there. Of course, some of the times it's much worse. And these humanitarian actors are giving humanitarian aids. You know, some people who have wounds, some people who have like, I don't know, blisters, sunburn, um, stomach pain, headache. Some people who want to call their families, some people who needs to charge the phone, some people who lost everything, and sometimes even lost their family members on the
Hmm.
route, and they don't know if they are alive or dead or where they are. So Red Cross is always like the safe point of access. Of course, if you come from a country in war, it's very complex to trust somebody dressed in military fatigues. So it's like, and when they see aid workers like the Red Cross, that's immediately, even for other languages and other cultures, that's immediately
Hmm.
the safe contact point. So they go there, and what I have seen is people from the Red Cross with um, kind faces, kind souls, and a lot of patience
Hmm.
to listen and attend thousands of people every day. Thousands.
Beyond migration, you've covered other issues in Latin America, from armed conflicts to environmental crisis. Why not be a wedding photographer? What drives you to keep telling these challenging, difficult, heartbreaking stories?
I think I see myself as a bridge, uh, and I see my pictures as as a bridge covering a gap of communication. Most of the time, I think people understand the things I see, but quite often I see myself in a position when I'm explaining things to people that are so basic for me, like trying to explain people what's the Darien Gap makes me realize that most of the people don't understand what's Darien Gap. If you Google what's the longest paved road in the world, sometimes Google says is the road, the Pan American road going from Alaska to the south of Argentina. And that's a lie because that's the Darien Gap. There's no road. And when I realized people don't understand that, it's like, wow. When we published the first piece about the Darien Gap, there were some people commenting on the piece. And it's like, why are they walking the jungle? Why they don't just take a bus? Like, yeah, because you can't. There's no road. There are no buses. There are no cars. There's the only way to reach the other side of the Darien Gap is crossing the jungle. There's no other way. So when I realized there was a lot of people who doesn't understand that, I start thinking, okay, this is important for me, and also that's like my personal way to think I'm contributing to society somehow because I'm helping society to understand part of the situations that are happening. Like it's easy to think about human groups about like just like a mass, non-faced mass of people, and then you can just like point your finger and try to decide what to do with them. When you talk about migrants at large, and you said the number, like 540,000 migrants crossed the Darien Gap from Latin America to Central America and tried to reach the States in 2023. Like, that's a group of people. But when you go from 540,000 migrants to Luis Miguel, 28 years, and Melissa, 4 years old, traveling the jungle, and Luis Miguel exhausted on the second day of traveling the jungle, then you start thinking a different way. And I think that's my way to contribute to society. And I think that's part of my compromise with society. And some people have some people could think that just showing them is meaningless because I don't provide any help for these migrants. But my way to reconcile myself is to think that I'm not providing care for these migrants, but I'm trying to raise the conversation to a different level where decision makers can see the situation and try to do something about it. And that's my way to contribute instead like carrying a big backpack with food and being delivering food in the Darien Gap. So I feel myself pretty committed to keep telling stories of the world that many of us don't see that often. And I think somehow I go to places and I photograph situations that people don't see on their daily life because they don't. And also, I think they don't need to. I don't want to drag all the humanity to the Darien Gap for them to see with their own eyes. I try to build a trusted audience and a trusted body of work so people can see my photographs and understand that I'm photographing the truth. I'm trying to bring the truth from these infernos to their realities.
Speaking of your photographs, we've come back to that. I'd like to mention that we're recording this interview just before the launch event of the Darien photo exhibit here at the IFRC headquarters in Geneva, which includes several of your photographs. So you will also be joining during that event the panel discussion, speaking about what you've learned, what we just heard now during your missions to the Darien. So I'll first take this opportunity to invite our listeners and viewers that are in Geneva to join us over the next couple of months and view the exhibit, which will hopefully become a traveling exhibit. And the second thing I'd like to bring up is we usually ask our guests to bring an item with them that has a personal meaning. And of course, it makes a lot of sense that you would bring something related to your work. Can you tell us about what it is and show us?
So this is the mock-up of my new upcoming book. It's called Darién. It's a book of migrants. It's a book about migrants and about migration. The core of the book is about migration and the Darien Gap, but the book covers way more than that. It starts on the migration of Venezuelans to Colombia and Brazil, as our conversation started, and it ends in the current lives of migrants living in the United States. Of course, the book tried to approach the wider variety of situations by migration, which means also like some of them died on the trail, some of them just go missing on the trail. But this collects most of my work of 11 years covering migration.
We're very excited to see the exhibit today, as well as this book once it comes out. When does it come out?
At the end of this month.
Oh, okay. So this is a real preview.
Yes, that's just a mock-up.
Okay.
It's on pre-sale, and yeah,
I see here at the end what you mentioned. These are some of the pictures. I don't know if we can show of the migrants before, during their trip in the Darien, and now when they're settled and safe. So thank you for that, Federico. And another question that I have for you, that we usually ask our guests, who most of the time come from within the IFRC network. The name of this podcast is People in the Red Vest. And I always ask our guests, what does the red vest mean to you? It's a symbolic color. Most of our staff and volunteers wear red vests, but they can also be, as you mentioned, white or blue, or other colors even. They all, of course, share the emblems of the Red Cross, Red Crescent. So as an outsider, what does the red vest symbolize to you?
So it's not just for me, but for me and for what I have seen of migrants. Once I see a red vest, I see two things. I see safety and hope. Because after traveling the Darien jungle, if you exit in the other side and you see the red vest, you know you made it. You know you're safe, and you know you have hope. If you have no food, you know that there's something, maybe cookie, maybe like slice of bread, maybe drink of fresh water, like fresh and water you can rely on, and also that you're gonna have like basic healthcare and basic information, but that means a lot. Not only for me, like for me and for migrants, and for me it's the same. Like when I'm crossing the jungle, I'm photographing people who's very anguished, and I can't provide care myself to the people I'm photographing because I'm photographing them. So when I'm looking at their faces and they see the red vests and they see the Red Cross, it's like taking a load out of their bags because they know there's safety and hope on these people.
On that positive note, thank you, Federico, for sharing your experiences with us today and allowing us to get to know you and your work a little bit.
Thank you, Sasha, for inviting me, and thank you to the IFRC.